Do you feel that school principals should be educated more on the subject of involving parents in the education of their children, so that they feel perhaps less threatened by the parents wanting to be involved, that it's not an attempt to undermine them as educators?
Yes.
When I said keep it short.
Sorry, I meant to do Yes, I mean, maybe you can hear me anyway, but I mean, we've written, and I would have said at different occasions, there's a huge issue in Ireland about the professional development of school leaders. And we have not invested as a system sufficiently in the continuing professional development of teachers, because it is the easiest thing to cut. Right. It's because you're not cutting a body. You know, I mean, we're obsessed with numbers and with spending at the moment. There are huge areas of school leaders' professional skills that we do need to invest in. And actually, the one you're talking about, dealing with parents, I mean, or that's a rather poor way of putting it. I'd say it's that sort of relationship building that needs to go on. There's a huge set of sensitivities and skills and awareness. I think when I was I must have been the most arrogant young principal you'd have ever cast your eyes over.
No, I was nodding because I was too.
And yet you did it in some ways out of ignorance, to be honest. And I wasn't a parent at the time, and I just sometimes now as a parent I reflect back in horror at some of the things I must have said to parents at meetings and all the rest of it. So yes is the answer.
Okay, thank you. Neil, my children's grandparents want to get involved in the children's learning. What would you suggest?
Okay. Whilst we're on getting involved, let's talk about the word homework, shall we? Because that's what often people, I hate homework, okay? Can you imagine a whole day at school, particularly for primary children, and they have to start again when they get home, like a busman's holiday? What I would say to parents and grandparents, because I think grandparents have a lovely, lovely role to play that's unique. Chat as you cook, gossip as you garden, and just, for me, I would want grandparents to do all those things that sometimes mums and dads don't have the time to do.
Yeah.
And actually go out there and knock conkers, like my dad used to do. We used to go conquering, but you could only get the conkers that had landed in cowpath. I actually want us to focus on those things that really enrich you as a person. I think grandparents can do that because they've got particularly the time to talk and the time to do those things that, grandparents can teach them to knit again and can teach them to make things again. And we've got to go back to some of those traditional things that made us the people that we were. And I think grandparents can do that.
Okay. Harold, can a person request that a school be evaluated if they have a concern, and how would they do that if allowed?
Can you request it? I mean, you can certainly write to me, and what we will do is we will consider that request as part of a whole range of factors that we use to select the schools. Just by requesting me, it doesn't mean that I'm actually going to do it. But I mean, there are a small number of times that people do write and say, look, you really should inspect X because of this. We consider it. Right? But there's a range of factors we consider. The length of time we've been in the school before, whether there are other complaints in the school, what are the standards in the assessments if it's a secondary school and we have the state exam results, and a lot of other factors as well.
Okay, thank you. Neil, I don't have much time to read with my child. What 10-minute activity could you suggest for me to do with him?
I've got a simple answer to that. Find time. Say that because I was brought up by a single parent who worked full-time and my dad brought my brother and I up on his own. Find time, because everybody can, and if you've got 5 children, it's your fault.
Say it was the fault of the Relationships and Sexuality Education Programme.
I know that did sound slightly flippant, and it wasn't meant to, because we don't have a magic wand. I could just lie and say, well, if you do a bit of this and a bit of that, but I'm not going to do a cop-out. You've got, and I do know how precious your lives are. Take it from me, I do know. But I'm sorry, things sometimes have to come first. I'm sorry.
Harold, why are class sizes increasing, and what are you and the government going to do about it? As we all know that children will progress far better in smaller classes, you cannot implement new teaching practice while class sizes are reaching 35 to 40 children per class.
Well, I'm not the government. I work for them, but I'm not the government, and I don't make the political decisions that one has to make about taxation and revenue in the country. In fact, everyone else in this room has just as much power in that as I have, because you're a voter like I am. So those are entirely political decisions. And none of the civil servants who work with me, and it would be people in the schools division, end up working out the details of all of that. But it is a question at the moment for them of enormously competing resources, enormously competing demand with falling resources, or very, very tight resources. Now, I think in fairness to the system, we have, as a country, in the crisis that we've been in whatever it is, the last, I forget how many years it is now, in fairness to it, pupil-teacher ratio has been the one area at primary level that has been preserved. I mean, teachers' jobs, unlike nurses and doctors, have been replaced when teachers have gone out of the system. Principal teachers have been replaced, so have deputy principals. That has not been true in the health service, and it has not been true in most of the rest of the public service. I'm not saying the pupil-teacher ratio is perfect here. There is also, I would quibble with one element of that question. The amount of evidence internationally that smaller class sizes actually helps is very, very limited, other than for very young children. Because I'd prefer my child, if I had the choice, and had to make the choice, to put her into a classroom with a super teacher and with larger numbers of kids, or a poorer teacher and smaller number of kids. I know which one I'd choose.
Thank you. It's nice that you got some applause as well, Harold. Neil was getting it all. Neil, do you feel that reading should be made really fun at a young age?
Oh, how long we go? Yeah. Absolutely. And when I say young age, when my lovely sister-in-law had a baby, the moment it's in the womb, we sang to that baby in the womb. I used to whip up her shirt and say, you've got to see the belly button, that's the way in. It's lovely. Of course it must be fun, and we must expose our young children to stories of every kind from the moment they're born and for the rest. Remember, don't stop. I still like Jack and Nori. Did you have Jack and Nori? Yeah. I still like the election now, so of course.
Harold, could the questions to the parents in a whole school evaluation be reviewed so as to get a fuller picture of what is actually happening at the school?
In fact, it's something that we have. I think there are 26 questions or 27 questions on the questionnaire at the moment. We know we have to revise them, in fact, but we wanted to leave them stable. We consulted with you in a very detailed way and changed them quite dramatically from the drafts we used to begin with to the ones that are there currently. But we have left them stable for the last 3 years, simply because we wanted to build up the sort of longitudinal data that I was able to share with you. I mean, if you keep changing the questions all the time, it's very difficult to do that. But we do plan to do them. We're also, can I just throw this out? We get very high response rates on the paper questionnaires. And if you've got them, what you do is you get a covering letter, you get the questionnaire, which you just have to colour the box, you know, yeah, agree, disagree, or whatever, or tick. And you get a sealed envelope to send it back. But we'd be interested in and wonder, would we get a different response if we did it online? Now, we're in two minds. One half of us thinks we'd get a much poorer response rate, and we might well exclude people who don't have access to the online system. And that's why we went for paper to begin with. On the other hand, people sometimes have said to us, people are more honest when they're working in an online environment. I don't know if that's true, but that it's more anonymous, you feel less distant, and therefore you'll put down whatever you really feel. I'm not sure. We are going to experiment in a small number of inspections with an online-only type of, because you couldn't run both in parallel. You wouldn't know who'd done both. Statistically speaking, it'd be difficult. But yes, they're up for review.
Okay. Neil, can you recommend, this is going to be a difficult question for the fact that they haven't said the age of the child, but can you recommend any book or series of books that I should read with my child? But I don't know how old the child is.
I hate those sorts of questions. You don't mind me saying that to the person that wrote it, because even if you said for a 9-year-old there's 9 and 9 and 9 and 9, and what I'm passionate about is that it's a role of both schools and parents to discover what a child's passions are. And if you suddenly discover they love any book that has the word poo and pants in, you kind of go with it. But if it's fairies, you go with fairies. I mean, I've got a little godson who's obsessed with dinosaurs at the moment, so so I can't really ask that question unless I know the child.
Okay, thank you. Harold, what involvement should parents have in the whole school self-evaluation?
Is it the self-evaluation? Right. Well, the first thing that in a self-evaluation process, the self-evaluation is being conducted by the school, mainly by the school teachers and by the school board. But we have said to them that an absolutely critical part of that, an absolutely critical part of that
is that you have to talk to parents, right? And you should be in a really good situation. Well, there are different levels of it. But first of all, I'd expect schools, as a minimum, to talk to parents and talk to parents' councils about what they think are the strengths and areas of weakness in the school, in the stage at which you're working out what is your priority as a school to tackle. A better stage further would be to use questionnaires or some form of focus groups like that, and there are guidelines on that within the school self-evaluation guidelines. I think a further stage of that is going back to those focus groups, the Parents' Council, or whatever other way you want, with some of the raw data and saying, do you see anything pattern in this? Because you will not be able to interpret it entirely yourself. And formally, the school's report, a summary of the school's self-evaluation report, should either be on the website or distributed to you. Right, it may come in paper or whatever else. But as a minimum, you should get a copy of the school's summary self-evaluation report. Not necessarily, the full report might have a lot of detail in it, of statistics and analysis that you won't want. But what you should be able to know from the school self-evaluation report, well, what does this school sees as its strengths and that it's doing well? What bits of it is it prioritising for improvement, and what are they doing about that improvement in an action plan for the next 12 months or 24 months?
Okay. And as we have, our speakers have been much more succinct in answering this afternoon than they were this morning. We're at our last question, so we've actually managed. So for Neil, what advice would you give to a school who has limited funds and time but really wants to make reading fun?
Limited funds. Okay. I would first of all make sure that you pressure your head teacher principal to be really imaginative in their fundraising efforts, because it's amazing what money you can get if you're imaginative. I applied for everything and anything I could lay my hands on. One fantastic way of filling up our library in my school was we asked children to bring in all their old books, and we discovered half of them actually weren't their books, they were ones they borrowed. I would do what happens to me. I get a letter every day from a school writing to me as a publisher saying, can we have some free books? I would also invest in asking the children to bring in their comics, because comics are so powerful and so valuable. Please would you get your schools to remember that magazines and comics can be a real way to switch on children. It's not just books. And I would just put creating reading areas as one of my top priorities.
Thank you. That's great, and thank you to both speakers for all the quick answers they gave.